Welcome to the Grow podcast. I'm Wendy Jo, and this is my co-host, Ashley. How's it going, Ashley?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. So this episode, we're talking about the afterlife, and that's a really broad topic. But I'm excited to chat with you about it and hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Recently, we've had, in our community here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, we've had several losses in the art and music community.
Wow.
We just went to a memorial last night for Claire Starr. Love you, Claire. And it was a big loss, and the whole community turned out. But you know, it really, I've been thinking a lot about this topic. Unfortunately, just because of everything that's been happening. Have you had a lot of loss also in your community?
Not necessarily, just within my family. We've had a lot of loss. And, ironically, I just did a recording with somebody else and they experienced a loss. And ironically, they were reading my book, and one of the sections is called Death. And so she was like, I can't read anymore because she didn't know what was going to be on the other side of the page.
Right.
And so,
yeah, if you haven't read Ashley's book, definitely pick it up, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Once you start reading, you won't put it down. So, yeah. Yes. So I understand what she's saying, because in your book, it's just everything is really compelling, So if she's going through that, it can either really help, right, to read about it, or maybe it just brings up too much. I don't know.
Yes. And to be honest with you, it is compelling, but I would actually like to say that it's it may feel really heavy, I think, is what a lot of people have. I think I translate that to, where people will start reading it and then the concepts get heavy and then they don't have the emotional stability or capacity, I'm not sure which one, to be able to move forward. And so, but anyway, since we're talking about the afterlife, the concept of death, in my opinion, triggers a lot of us in a way that we don't want to confront or have conversation around it. And it was interesting because when she said that to me, I let her say what she needed to say, but I eventually told her, I was like, well, ironically, the chapter has nothing to do with death. It has everything to do with life. So it was when I talked about my experience with postpartum.
Right. And the thing is, so that statement that it has everything to do with life, I think that's this topic, it's true to this topic as well. So, I was taught from a young age that, death is a part of life. It's part of the cycle, and so I still went through some ups and downs, usually around loss, right? With what really happens, and my mother, who was very, she wasn't religious. I was raised Jewish, but she really loved all the traditions and believed the key tenets really of the religion. And she would say, well, don't worry about it. Dust to dust. When you're gone, you're gone. This life is the most important thing. And that message has stayed with me. I do believe that, although I believe there is an afterlife, I don't agree with her exactly, but I do think that this life is most important.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's what's present. That's what's current. That's the only thing you have actual control over, is the physical body that you get to operate every day. So
I love that, the physical body you get to operate.
So, you can't control everything beyond the death of this body. So, why not just focus on the current moment? And so I think a lot of us, we feel sadness because of the void that's left because of the person that transitions over. And so this actually kind of goes back to me as far as like the ability to heal. It's like creating a wound or opening in ourselves in the physical plane as somebody begins to transition. And so we have to emotionally heal. And so I don't know if you guys learned this in OT school, but denial, anger.
Oh, yes.
Bargaining.
Yes.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
go through all of those phases, and in order to get to the end of this grieving process, but it's really a fluid experience. And so,
Right.
it begs the question, are we healers? I think we all are if we've all gone through this process. So I don't know.
Right. Right. And even if we're pretty certain about our thoughts regarding the afterlife, like my mother was, or like I am, I have different opinions about what happens, but um, it's still no one knows for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, we just are never given that information exactly to the point where everybody can say, "Oh, this is exactly what's going to happen." you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but I feel pretty certain about what I think about it. But I also think I had the opportunity to spend time with a healer, a good deal of time talking through this topic,
Yeah.
and then finding answers for myself. I think a lot of people their ideas are rooted in their religion. Has that
Yeah.
been your experience?
I think so, but I think is around the ceremonious part of it. And so the funeral, or however you, I guess, celebrate the transition. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I think it's rooted in the transition, the ceremonies that we conduct as a result of the death itself. And so I have a hard time with even the ceremony process. But confronting the idea of death, and my perspective is a little bit skewed because I'm a nurse and I've seen a lot of it.
Sure.
And so, and literally witness the passing, the transition, what it looks like, and so in some pretty horrid situations and bagged up bodies and all those kind of things. And so, I think the ceremony aspect, I'm not very tied to. I'm also not 100% tied to a specific religion either.
Right.
So
Right.
who knows?
Right, right, exactly. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about our thoughts about what happens when we pass and what the afterlife is like from each of our perspectives. We'll see you in a few moments. Hey there, Wendy Jo from the Grow Podcast. So this week our topic is the afterlife. What a broad and vast topic. And how many people have explained what happens when you cross over, when you enter the afterlife? But no one really knows for sure, right? So what do I think? I think you see and feel exactly what you want to see and feel so that you don't have any undue stress as you cross over. And we're back. So we're talking about the afterlife today. And I thought, I could give you my perspective, what I've seen and heard in meditation and working with that healer I talked about earlier. So I think when you pass, you actually see whatever you thought you were going to see. Because I feel like God or spirit or whatever you want to call it is a compassionate, loving God. And they don't want you to be uncomfortable, right? So logically, if you think you're going to see your family or you think you're going to see palaces and streets of gold, that's what you're going to see. And it kind of gives you a level of comfort in your passage. And then, you're kind of a soul just buzzing around at some frequency depending on how much or how little you grew in that life, where you are spiritually, you're vibrating at a different frequency. And so you will tend to congregate with other souls at the same frequency. And you basically are surrounded by love. And so you're trying to work out your life, what you did, what you didn't do, what you'd like to do differently. And I feel it can take a very long time because no one's punishing you. I do believe everyone goes to heaven. I know there's a lot of argument about that. People want to see punishment, right?
That was
But
my question.
but
What thoughts on heaven?
Yeah, I think everyone is there and buzzing around as a soul trying to work out their life. Some people or some souls will spend a really long time depending on what they did or didn't do. And when ready, then you kind of declare what you want to accomplish in the next life, and boom, you're in somebody's womb randomly. So that's what I think happens. Is maybe a little more to it, but generally that's what I think. And I feel that when you run across someone who may have been in heaven at the same time, at your same frequency, you really feel it. You can feel that vibration. And sometimes we call them soulmates, right? It's not always romantic. It's just someone at your same frequency that you feel good around and feel like you have things in common.
Sometimes I hear people call them twin flames too.
Right? There's that. That's I think that's like a really like you were there vibrating the same way, working on the same stuff.
Yeah.
And now here you are, you run into each other and it's like boom, you know?
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
So I do have very similar like concepts around it. The details I think are where it's like is it or is it not? I don't know. But I do believe that there is a transition period where like you still see things in like that make you more comfortable from a physical standpoint. So if you want to see roads of gold or whatever during that transition, so that way you don't scare yourself as you transition into your spirit self, then you know that's just what it is. Because time and space is just time and space. Those things no longer are relevant. It can be manipulated. It can be whatever. And then I think there is this like in between phase where you do float around, similar to what you described. And again, working out your purpose, your divine purpose, how you're supposed to contribute in a specific time or space. And I think in spirit realm, there is a decision made as to how you can accomplish that. And I'm not sure if it's a random womb. For some reason, I feel like it is a perfect womb. Like it was designed for you, you know? And so, because there are certain lessons that need to be learned in order for you to achieve certain things or to achieve certain lessons or to get to your divine purpose. And so some of those things, I think are that environment is like, no, this is where you need to be right now. This is your environment. And so it's for us in the physical plane to navigate it, and we just don't know. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, it's very similar, like we usually are about different topics. Yeah, I think when you choose whatever you're trying to accomplish, then you'll choose a path. But what always kind of I wish that we knew when we got here what we chose.
Too.
You know, because a lot of times you spend time, you know, trying this, trying that, and then you find you just feel it when you know you're on the right path. And it would be nice if it was sooner, but then maybe you wouldn't have the same lessons. I don't know.
Yeah. And you know what? I would be even just happy in recognizing that I didn't come here in this body as a body. I came here as a spirit in a body. Like it would be nice if I even knew that fact from the front end, because then I think for a lot of reasons, I would cherish childhood a lot more. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know how kids are like, they're just doing stuff and making mistakes and, you know, all these things. And it's like, I know that's a part of childhood, but what if they knew, like, not only do you have prime physical body capacity.
Right. Yeah. I guess, you know, we don't know the reasons, right? Yeah. But I do think also that the soul contains in it the seeds of compassion, understanding, sensitivity. And in life, we either grow those things or we don't. I don't think there's any punishment if we don't. If sometimes we recede, like the previous life, we grew them quite a lot, and then we go and float around and we come back and maybe they recede this next life, right? But I think those seeds are carried lifetime to lifetime. So that's why when you see a child who seems so understanding and grown up and sensitive, and my thought is, oh, they came here with that, because
they're a more evolved soul.
right, right, yeah, and I guess I can't think about the afterlife without thinking about other planets as well. And this is where it gets a little, people may we may lose some people who are like, what? But I think this isn't all there is. I think it's really egocentric for us to think we're the only planet that's got life and is evolved, and my opinion. But so I think when we've accomplished everything Earth can provide, we're going to move on to another planet. Or maybe we'll be a spirit guide for someone. Some souls choose to do that when their seeds are really full and they're like, I don't want to go back to Earth. Maybe I can guide someone for the next 100 years while they go through their life.
When we look at death, in my physical body, obviously I feel what everybody else feels: sadness, loss, all the things. But when you look at it beyond just the loss of one person, like, it's a contribution to another area and a new space and new time. You see what I'm saying? Like, because that spirit could be a spirit guide for somebody else, right?
Yes.
Or it can come back into the physical realm in a different space in a different time and create different impact, right? And so, to your point about, like, just knowing that we're not the only ones here in anywhere, right? Or everywhere. I don't know what
right. Right.
But if we recognize that, then not if we recognize that, because that kind of seems judgmental, but like when we recognize that, or when we're aware of that, it becomes a little less like about us and a little bit more about like how we're intended to operate in this world.
When I think about the mainstream religions and like, if you do this will, you will go to heaven. If you don't, you will, in some traditions, go to hell, right? So it's very like black and white, linear. Your behavior is only going to affect you in a negative or positive way.
Like, mainstream religion does a really great job of quantifying everything as either good or bad.
Right.
And it's like, but first of all, I don't know a human alive that doesn't have some sort of habit that they probably shouldn't be doing.
Right. Yes.
Like, because of the amount of like the sensations that we experience, like the use of our senses, right? It is a gift for us to have the use of those senses and to use them and to experience them and to participate in life. I don't, sometimes people say things like, you shouldn't do this, or like, going back to the bad thing. But I think that is part of the fruit of life. Like, that is the beauty of being here, is to see beautiful things and to touch things that feel good and to taste amazing foods, right? Like, you wouldn't be given the senses if it weren't meant to be utilized and leveraged. It's just that sometimes we don't know how to say no. But we don't know how to turn it off.
Right. And if you say, God said you shouldn't do that, it may be for some people that's a way that they can control themselves, right? Rather than growing their soul to figure out how to manage, themselves and have a good impact on the world. It's a different mindset, but does it affect where they go in the afterlife?
No.
We don't know. I don't think it does. Right. I agree with you. I don't think it does. But, that's the thought anyway. And we'll be right back.
Have you heard of the Cannabis Nursing School? It's a place where cannabis nursing, entrepreneurship, and spirituality meet. The Highline Tribe is waiting for you, and it's so easy to find. CannabisNursingSchool.com.
And we're back. We're talking about the afterlife today and death also. Which is, as you've pointed out throughout the show, it's a transition, right? But what are your thoughts about talking about these topics out in the community with others?
Yeah, so having these conversations is actually quite difficult, and it takes a lot of awareness on my part to be able to gauge the room, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, recognizing when the conversation will land and recognizing when it probably won't. And because it can be actually hurtful if it doesn't land properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's never my intention to be hurtful to anybody else, you know? So sometimes I find myself like holding back or not, sharing some of my thoughts or opinions or things like that because out of fear of hurting the other person that's involved. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Right. And like we've pointed out, religion really has very strict guidelines about this for,
Mhm.
for people who follow. I'm living in the Bible Belt, and people are pretty certain you have to be saved to go to heaven.
Yeah.
Which I don't agree with. As I said earlier, I think everyone's going, but they don't like to hear that
Yeah.
because they're trying so hard to follow the rules, and, you know, people who aren't shouldn't be going.
Yeah.
So it's a very different mindset. um
For sure.
yeah.
And
um
and it actually kind of lands into like what judgment is. Like we always want to judge somebody for their behavior or their belief or the thing that they are. And so, as you become more and more spiritually awakened, not judging people becomes a thing. It's like, how could you not know this thing?
right.
Right. And it's like, no, that's not part of their path. That's not part of their journey just yet. And so,
Right.
going back to where the conversation lands, sometimes, you kind of have to test the waters to see, is this an educational moment? Is this a moment where I can spark awareness in this person? Or is this something that's going to get blocked completely and it's going to cause chaos in that person?
Right.
And so, part of it is my duty, I feel, to share and sprinkle little sprinkles of light wherever I land, but it's not for everybody. The sprinkles aren't for everybody.
Right. And sometimes people come to opening their mind out of some sort of trauma,
Hmm.
right? And death itself can cause so much fear that
Yeah.
I think that's when if the conversation turns to that, people, they have lots of fears around it because they're not really that comfortable with what they think it will happen or with what they've done in their own life.
Yeah.
And so I think if that fear is elicited, it's time to sort of just take a look, take a look within and figure out where it's coming from. um, I my beliefs became pretty strong with what I feel now, after going through different spiritual transformations, to the point where, I several years ago, this woman, it was when I had my spiritual shop. She comes in the door crying, and it took me a while to get out of her what she was upset about,
Hmm.
right? Because she was so ashamed of herself.
Mm.
And what had happened was, she was pregnant. The baby, they were very certain that this baby was going to be quite ill if she
Hmm.
carried it. And so she decided to have an abortion.
Wow.
And she had been conditioned to truly believe she was going to hell, even though she made this decision out of,
Life,
humanity and
life
love.
preservation, right?
Right. Right. Love for not having a very sick child and bringing that into her family where she had other children, that anyway. And so I told her what I thought happens, like I described today, and it brought so much healing and peace to her.
Hmm.
I could see that she really took it in.
Yeah.
And, some people might say, oh, well, yeah, that you gave her an excuse, or you gave her, you know, unjustified comfort because they believe other things.
Hmm.
But I think that God is pretty logical, and I think that, when a soul like that is so new, she was in her first trimester. I said to her, from what I've heard and seen from spirit, that soul goes right back and will
Hmm.
come right back.
Hmm.
It wasn't time. It wasn't their time to have a human life
Yeah.
right now. And um, anyway, so I think we have to think about, um, how healing is it to think if you do this, you go burn in a lake of fire, and if you do this, you're going to go and live in streets of gold.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, and I don't. I think we are here to make mistakes. We're
Mhm.
here to get messy. We're here to make mistakes.
Right.
Mistakes only
And
happen.
mistakes, and sometimes make decisions that we
Yes,
don't want to have to make.
right.
you
The
know,
hard ones, right.
right. And that can really grow your soul if done in the right way, not judging yourself so harshly and trying to figure out what it all means rather than just following doctrine.
Yeah. And part of the healing is relieving. It's three emotions: guilt, fear, jealousy. They don't really belong. They exist because something is out of whack. Like you haven't, dealt with yourself. You're not okay with the decision. You're in a position where you don't want to make this, whatever it is. And so, or things that are out of your control. And sometimes we just have to accept the decision that was made, because those emotions will eat you alive, and
Right.
especially if you stack
Absolutely.
them over a lifetime.
Mhm. I agree. So I think if you're not sure what you feel about the afterlife, take some time and meditate and sit with yourself,
Mm.
journal about it. Maybe read some books that are out of your wheelhouse, or look at what some other different religions than one you were raised in are saying about it. And then you can come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, for sure. And, just being able to be mindful and aware and in your body and present and confront whatever feelings come up when you talk about death or the afterlife or whatever, or religion, and just saying, okay, why is this emotion coming up? Is this something that is sourced in trauma? Is this something that's unresolved? Is it something that comes from, the little girl or the little boy that, once was?
I agree. Well, I hope this was helpful and have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.